Data-driven and creative student-generated assessment design with MagicSchoolAI. In traditional classrooms, assessment has almost always been something done to students rather than with them. Teachers create the questions, set the parameters, and decide what counts as evidence of mastery. Students respond, often passively, and then wait for the verdict. This model is efficient, but it leaves out something powerful: the idea that students themselves can be active participants in designing assessments. When students generate assessment items, craft performance tasks, or create their own quizzes, they engage with content at a much deeper level. To write a question about linear equations, for example, a student must understand the mechanics of solving them. To design a word problem about ratios, the student must not only know the math, but also the context that makes the math meaningful. In short, the act of creating assessment tasks requires synthesis, transfer, and creativity, all hallmarks of higher-order thinking. Historically, student-generated assessments have been rare. They take time, they require scaffolding, and many teachers understandably worry about the validity and fairness of letting students write their own questions. Yet in the age of artificial intelligence, the barriers are lower than ever. MagicSchoolAI allows both teachers and students to generate, refine, and iterate on assessments quickly. Instead of spending hours drafting items from scratch, students can use AI as a brainstorming partner, a source of inspiration, and a tool for checking accuracy. Teachers remain the gatekeepers. Students gain agency and voice in how their learning is measured. This shift has profound implications. It reframes assessment from a static endpoint to a dynamic learning process. It transforms students from passive respondents into co-designers of their learning journey, and it prepares them for a world where critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration are valued just as much as getting the right answer. Why student-generated assessment matters. At first glance, the idea of students writing their own assessments may seem like a gimmick. Why would we ask learners to create the very tests they're supposed to take? But the educational benefits run deep. When students design assessment items, they reveal what they think is important about the content. This helps teachers see not only what students know, but what they value. It also surfaces misconceptions in a subtle way. A poorly constructed question can show gaps in understanding more clearly than an incorrect answer ever could. There is also the motivational dimension. Students are more engaged when they see their work reflected in the assessment process. If their questions appear on a class quiz, they feel a sense of ownership. If they create performance tasks for peers, they begin to view themselves not just as learners, but as contributors to the learning community. From a cognitive perspective, creating assessments demands metacognition. Students must think about thinking. They must ask themselves, what does it mean to truly understand this concept? What kind of problem would demonstrate mastery? How can I make sure the question is clear and solvable? These are not trivial skills. They align directly with the mathematical practice standards that call for reasoning, precision, and communication. This is where AI tools like MagicSchoolAI become indispensable. Without support, students may struggle to create valid items. They might draft questions that are too easy, too confusing, or mathematically flawed. Teachers, meanwhile, may feel overwhelmed by the need to check and edit every student submission. AI can act as a scaffolding bridge, helping both teachers and students engage in the work more efficiently. For instance, a student studying proportional reasoning could ask MagicSchoolAI to generate a few sample problems about recipes. The student can then review those examples, select one, and adapt it into their own question. Or, the student might draft a rough problem in their own words, and use the AI to refine it into mathematically precise language. In both cases, the AI is not the author of the assessment, the student is. The AI is simply the assistant, providing drafts, feedback, and structure. Teachers can also use AI to vet student-generated items. A student might propose a word problem that is mathematically interesting, but poorly worded. The teacher can run it through MagicSchoolAI, asking for clearer phrasing or for step-by-step solutions to ensure accuracy. This keeps the workload manageable, while still honoring student agency. The way student-generated assessments look will differ across grade spans. In elementary classrooms, students might create math journals where they pose one question each week for their peers to solve. With AI assistance, they can turn their ideas into polished prompts that classmates can attempt. Imagine a third grader writing, "I had 12 cookies and I gave some to my friend. Now I have 7. How many did I give?" MagicSchoolAI can help reframe the question in multiple ways, generating versions with visuals or number lines. In middle school, the practice could become more formal. Students might be assigned to create 2 quiz questions per unit, one computational, one applied. They submit their drafts, and the teacher curates a class quiz composed of student contributions. With AI in the mix, students can refine their work, ensuring problems align with the content and include answer keys. The teacher then has a ready-made quiz that is both authentic and motivating, since the class knows they are solving problems created by peers. In high school, the opportunities expand further. Students studying statistics might design survey questions, collect data, and then turn their findings into assessment tasks for others. Or in an algebra class, students might be asked to write a performance task that demonstrates the use of quadratic equations in a real-world context, such as modeling the path of a ball. AI can assist in polishing these tasks, embedding scaffolds, or providing extensions. By this point, student-generated assessments become indistinguishable from authentic projects. Challenges and validity. Of course, opening the door to student-generated assessments comes with challenges. Teachers worry, and rightly so, about the validity of these tasks. Not every student-created question will accurately reflect the standard being assessed. Some will be too simple, others overly complex. This is where the teacher's role as editor and curator remains crucial. There are also questions of grading. Should student-created items count the same as teacher-created ones? Should they appear on summative tests or be limited to formative checks? Each school or department must wrestle with these questions. What AI changes is not the philosophical dilemma, but the practicality. With AI, the burden of checking accuracy, generating solutions, and rewording items is greatly reduced. Another challenge is equity. Not all students will have the same ability to draft creative or well-phrased problems, especially if language barriers or confidence issues are in play. Teachers must ensure that all students receive scaffolds, not just the strongest writers. This is another space where AI can provide support. It can help reframe clunky drafts into clear, solvable questions without diminishing the student's contribution. Professional development applications. For teachers, learning how to guide student-generated assessment is itself a professional development journey. In workshops, educators can practice the same process as their students. They can attempt to draft questions on a familiar concept, run them through AI for refinement, and then analyze the results together. This not only builds skill, but also empathy. Teachers experience firsthand the challenges their students will face. One powerful PD activity involves giving teachers a set of student data, then asking them to design assessment tasks that students might generate in response. For example, if half the class misunderstood slope as rise over run, teachers can imagine what kind of faulty question a student with that misconception might write. They can then use AI to correct or clarify the draft. This kind of exercise deepens understanding of both student thinking and assessment design. If embraced fully, student-generated assessment could change the culture of classrooms. Instead of tests being something done to students, assessments become co-constructed. Instead of passively waiting to be judged, students actively participate in designing what counts as evidence of learning. With AI as a supportive partner, this model is no longer aspirational, but feasible. Imagine a classroom where every quiz includes at least one student-created item. Imagine a project where students generate an entire test for the class, with AI serving as the behind-the-scenes editor. Imagine a department where teachers share not only their own assessments, but also curated banks of student-generated tasks, refined and improved year after year. This is not only possible, it is within reach. By weaving student creativity into assessment, teachers send a powerful message. Math is not just about answering questions, it is about asking them. And when students learn to ask good questions, with clarity, precision, and creativity, they are demonstrating the deepest form of understanding. In the elementary and middle grades, fractions and ratios are notorious for producing misconceptions that persist into later years. Having students create their own assessment items in this domain can be especially powerful because it forces them to articulate what fractions mean. For example, a fifth grader might try to write a problem about adding 1/2 and 1/3. At first, they may produce something simplistic like, what is 1/2 plus 1/3? With AI as a partner, the student can take this rough idea and expand it into a story. You eat half of a pizza for lunch. Later, you eat a third of another pizza for dinner. How much pizza did you eat in total? This reframing not only makes the problem more engaging, but also clarifies the context for why unlike denominators matter. If the AI generates variations on the same scenario, the student can choose the one they feel best captures the concept. Through this process, the student is not just rehearsing computation, but grappling with the meaning of fractions in context. The teacher, meanwhile, can see whether the student has internalized the concept of common denominators by the way the problem is phrased. Ratios lend themselves to similar creativity. Students can be asked to design ratio problems connected to their own lives, comparing the number of songs on two playlists, the ratio of wins to losses for a favorite sports team, or the mix of ingredients in a recipe. MagicSchoolAI can help polish the problem and ensure the numbers produce clean outcomes, but the core idea comes from the student. The act of connecting math to personal interests makes assessment feel less like an external demand and more like a meaningful expression of understanding. At the middle and high school levels, algebra offers fertile ground for student-generated assessments. When students create problems involving equations, functions, or inequalities, they reveal how they interpret symbolic relationships. For instance, a student might attempt to write a problem about solving a linear equation. They draft, solve 3x plus 5 solve 20. The teacher could accept it as is, but with AI's help, the problem can be expanded into multiple formats. It might become a word problem about ticket sales, a visual representation with a balance scale, or a multi-step problem requiring comparison with a second equation. By interacting with these possibilities, the student begins to see equations not as isolated symbols, but as representations of real-world situations. Function concepts are another rich area. A student might be asked to create a problem about quadratic functions. At first, they might write a simple item: find the vertex of y derives x2 plus 4x plus 3. With AI support, the same idea can become an authentic performance task. A company models its profit with the function y derives x2 plus 4x plus 3, where x is the number of items produced. What production level will maximize profit? What is the maximum profit? The second version not only tests the same skill, but also situates it in a meaningful context. Students designing such tasks begin to see how mathematics can model decisions and trade-offs. Geometry lends itself to visual and applied problem creation. When students create geometry assessments, they often draw figures, label them, and then generate questions based on those diagrams. This process requires a dual focus. They must understand the properties of shapes and also communicate them clearly. For example, a student might sketch a triangle and ask for the missing angle. With AI, that sketch can be turned into a polished diagram accompanied by precise language. A triangle has two angles measuring 35 degrees and 65 degrees. Write a problem that asks for the missing angle and explain how you know your answer is correct. MagicSchoolAI can also help expand these items into multi-step investigations. A basic problem about area might be reframed into a scenario about designing a playground or painting a wall, adding layers of application and decision-making. Students see that geometry is not just about abstract figures on paper, but about spatial reasoning in the world around them. Statistics and probability offer some of the most engaging opportunities for student-generated assessment because they are inherently tied to data students can collect themselves. A class might conduct a survey on favorite after-school activities. Instead of the teacher designing all the assessment items, students can be asked to generate questions about the data. One student might ask peers to create a bar graph. Another might ask them to calculate the mode. A third might pose a question about making predictions based on the sample. With AI's support, each student's draft can be refined for clarity and rigor. Probability can be equally interactive. Students might create problems based on rolling dice, drawing cards, or spinning spinners. At first, their drafts may lack precision. They might write, "What is the chance of rolling a 6?" With AI assistance, this can be developed into a more complex scenario. You roll 2 dice. What is the probability that the sum is greater than 9? Explain your reasoning. Students learn not just to answer probability questions, but to construct them, which requires a deeper grasp of sample spaces and likelihood. The educational value of student-generated assessment is not merely anecdotal. Research on metacognition, self-regulated learning, and student agency consistently points to the benefits of learners engaging in the design of their own evaluations. When students are asked to create questions, they are forced to reflect on their own understanding. This reflection builds metacognitive awareness. They begin to notice not only what they know, but how they know it. Studies on formative assessment also emphasize the importance of feedback loops. When students design assessment items, the feedback is not limited to right or wrong answers. It extends to the quality of the questions themselves. Teachers can respond to the clarity, rigor, and accuracy of student-created tasks, turning the assessment process into a two-way dialogue. There is also evidence that student-generated assessments increase motivation and ownership. Students who see their work reflected in class assessments are more engaged and take pride in their contributions. This aligns with theories of student-centered learning, where agency and voice are critical factors in persistence and achievement. For many teachers, the idea of student-generated assessment feels like a paradigm shift. Professional development must address both the philosophy and the practice. Teachers need to understand why this approach is valuable and how to implement it without losing control of instructional quality. One effective strategy is to have teachers experience the process themselves. In a workshop, they can be asked to design 2 questions on a math concept of their choice. Then, with AI assistance, they refine their drafts. This allows them to see how AI can support clarity and rigor while still preserving their original intent. The next step is to analyze the questions collectively. What misconceptions do they reveal? What skills do they assess? And how might they be improved? Another PD approach is to use anonymized student-generated items from real classrooms. Teachers can evaluate these items, noting strengths and weaknesses, and then use AI to improve them. This process builds confidence that the model can work in their own classrooms, and it highlights the critical role of teacher oversight in maintaining validity. No educational innovation is without its challenges, and student-generated assessment is no exception. Validity is the most obvious concern. Not every student-generated question will accurately measure the intended skill. Some may be confusing or too simplistic. Teachers must act as editors and curators, ensuring that the assessments remain aligned with standards and instructional goals. Grading also presents challenges. If students generate their own items, how should those be scored? Should they count as practice, as formative checks, or as part of summative assessments? Schools and departments must develop clear policies to ensure fairness. There is also the issue of equity. Not all students will be equally skilled at drafting questions, particularly if language barriers or confidence issues are at play. Teachers must provide scaffolds to ensure that all students can participate meaningfully. AI can help level this playing field by refining drafts into clearer questions, but the teacher must remain sensitive to the underlying disparities. The future of assessment may not lie in replacing teacher-designed tasks with AI or even with student-generated items. Instead, it lies in a partnership, teachers guiding, students contributing, and AI scaffolding the entire process. In this vision, assessments become less about static measurement and more about dynamic learning. A classroom where students regularly create assessments is a classroom where learners are active, reflective, and empowered. With AI making the logistics manageable, this vision is no longer aspirational. It is entirely possible, and it holds the promise of transforming how we think about assessment. To understand how this can work in practice, it helps to picture classrooms that have embraced student-generated assessment with AI as a partner. In a middle school algebra class, the teacher wanted students to demonstrate mastery of slope and intercepts. Instead of giving a traditional test, she asked each student to create one problem about slope for their peers. Students drafted questions ranging from, "What is the slope of a line?" through 2, 5, and 4, 9, to, "If a skateboard ramp rises 4 feet for every 10 feet of run, what is its slope?" On their own, many of the problems were uneven in difficulty. With MagicSchoolAI, the drafts were polished, clarified, and adjusted for consistency. The teacher then compiled the strongest of these into a class quiz. Students were excited to see their own work appear, and when solving peers' questions, they engaged with the material differently. They weren't just showing what they knew, they were entering into a dialogue with their classmates about the nature of the concept. In an elementary school, a teacher working on fractions had students design questions about sharing food. One student wrote, "I cut a pizza into 8 slices. I eat 3 slices. How many are left?" Another student asked, "I drink half of a juice box. My friend drinks 1/4. How much did we drink?" With AI, the teacher expanded these questions into multiple versions, some with visuals, others with slightly altered numbers. Over the course of the unit, the students not only solved fraction problems, but also became more fluent in creating them, reinforcing their conceptual understanding in the process. At the high school level, a statistics class turned a student-generated assessment into a capstone project. Students collected data from the school community on topics they cared about: favorite music genres, hours of sleep, or use of social media. They then designed test questions using their own data sets. Some asked about measures of central tendency, others about variability or trends. With AI support, the questions were cleaned for clarity, and the data sets were visualized in graphs. The final exam was not a teacher-created document, but a curated set of student-generated questions that covered the unit comprehensively. Students not only performed better, but reported feeling more invested because they saw their own voices reflected in the assessment. Grading and validity in student-generated assessments. No matter how engaging or creative an assessment format may be, teachers must still grapple with questions of grading and validity. The purpose of assessment is not only to inspire, but to measure. Can student-generated assessments fulfill that purpose reliably? The answer lies in how they are integrated. Teachers should not abandon traditional assessments entirely. Instead, student-generated tasks can complement and enrich them. For instance, a unit test might still include a teacher-designed section to ensure alignment with standards, while a student-generated section offers opportunities for creativity and application. The combined assessment is both valid and engaging. Validity can also be preserved through teacher curation. Not every student-generated item will be appropriate, but with AI, teachers can quickly screen, refine, and adapt submissions. This ensures that the final assessment reflects the intended content while still drawing on student contributions. Grading policies also need clarity. Some teachers may grade student-generated items for accuracy and clarity, while others may count the creation process itself as formative practice. One effective approach is to treat the act of question creation as a demonstration of mastery. If a student can craft a high-quality problem and provide a solution, that is strong evidence of understanding, even if they occasionally falter when solving teacher-provided items. Teachers can also use rubrics that focus on the quality of the question, the appropriateness of the solution, and the clarity of the explanation. This shifts the emphasis from right answers to deeper thinking and communication, which aligns with the broader goals of performance-based assessment. Scaling student-generated assessment school-wide. While individual classrooms can experiment with this model, the real impact comes when schools or districts adopt it systemically. A school-wide initiative might begin with a simple goal. Each grade level will incorporate at least one student-generated assessment per semester. Teachers would receive professional development on guiding the process, using AI for support, and curating student submissions. Over time, the school could build a library of student-generated assessment items. These would be stored digitally, organized by grade and topic, and refined each year. MagicSchoolAI could even be prompted to sort and classify them, suggesting which items align best with particular standards. The result would be a living bank of assessments co-created by students and teachers, constantly evolving and growing richer. At the district level, the potential is even greater. Districts often struggle with the tension between standardization and flexibility. Student-generated assessments offer a way to honor both. The core standards remain intact, but the mode of assessment allows local flavor, creativity, and voice. Students in one school might design geometry problems about local architecture, while students in another focus on agricultural applications. With AI ensuring that the underlying math is solid, these diverse contexts enrich the overall assessment landscape. Challenges and how to address them. Despite the promise, there are real challenges. Some teachers worry that allowing students to generate assessments will compromise rigor. Others fear that it will take too much time away from instruction. These concerns are valid, but they can be addressed. Rigor is maintained by teacher oversight. AI helps by flagging errors, checking solutions, and suggesting improvements. Time is managed by starting small, perhaps one question per student per unit, and then scaling up as routines develop. Equity remains the most complex challenge. Students with stronger language skills or higher confidence may dominate the process. To counter this, teachers must provide scaffolds, sentence starters for problem wording, examples of good questions, and opportunities for collaboration. AI can act as a support here as well, rephrasing clumsy drafts into clear language without stripping away student intent. Finally, grading must be fair and transparent. Teachers need to explain how student-generated items will be evaluated, whether through rubrics, completion grades, or integration into summative assessments. When students understand the criteria, they are more likely to engage fully and less likely to view the process as arbitrary. The transformative potential. At its core, student-generated assessment is about more than efficiency or novelty. It represents a shift in how we view students. They are not just recipients of knowledge, but producers of it. They are not just problem solvers, but problem posers. In the age of AI, this distinction matters more than ever. Machines can solve problems quickly, but it takes human creativity to decide which problems are worth solving. By involving students in assessment creation, we prepare them for this new reality. They learn to think critically, to evaluate clarity, to anticipate misconceptions, and to connect math to meaningful contexts. They also learn that their voices matter in shaping their own education. With AI as a supportive partner, this once daunting task becomes not only possible, but practical. The future of assessment may well be one where every test, project, or portfolio is a blend. Teacher-designed for alignment, student-generated for ownership, and AI-assisted for efficiency. In such a system, assessment stops being a static snapshot and becomes a dynamic dialogue, a conversation between teacher, student, and technology about what it means to truly understand. Extended professional development frameworks. For teachers to integrate student-generated assessments meaningfully, professional learning cannot be a one-off session. It requires sustained engagement, practice, and reflection. Schools and districts that wish to implement this approach should consider multi-phase professional development frameworks, where teachers gradually build comfort with the philosophy, learn to use AI as a support, and reflect on their practice over time. A first phase might focus on teacher experience. In a half-day workshop, educators try their hand at creating assessment items themselves. They experience the vulnerability of drafting a question, realize how tricky it can be to balance clarity with rigor, and then use MagicSchoolAI to refine their drafts. This hands-on immersion helps teachers build empathy for the process their students will later experience. Teachers leave not only with their own improved items, but with a clearer sense of the supports their students will need. A second phase shifts the focus to classroom practice. Teachers pilot student-generated assessment activities in small ways, asking students to design one problem as homework, or dedicating a few minutes at the end of class for students to draft a quiz item. Teachers bring those early attempts back to a collaborative session where they analyze the quality of the items, discuss patterns, and brainstorm ways to scaffold the process. This cycle of trying, reflecting, and refining ensures that the work is not theoretical, but grounded in the lived realities of classrooms. A third phase involves integration into larger assessments. Teachers begin curating student-generated items for quizzes or projects, blending them with teacher-designed problems. They use AI to help vet, edit, and align items with standards. In professional learning communities, teachers compare strategies for balancing validity with student creativity, sharing best practices, and building a collective resource bank. Over time, what began as a small experiment becomes part of the assessment culture of the school. The final phase is leadership. Teachers who have developed expertise in guiding student-generated assessments share their practices with colleagues, mentor new adopters, and contribute to district-wide initiatives. In this way, professional development moves from external training to internal capacity building. The approach becomes self-sustaining, embedded in the professional identity of the teaching community. Collaboration is essential for scaling student-generated assessments. When teachers work in isolation, the burden of editing and curating student work can feel heavy. But when they collaborate, the workload is distributed and the quality of assessments improves. One effective model is the collaborative curation cycle. Teachers in a grade-level team ask their students to create assessment items at the end of a unit. Each teacher brings a sample of those items to the team meeting. Using MagicSchoolAI, the team refines the best submissions, ensuring clarity, accuracy, and alignment with standards. The polished items are then compiled into a shared bank that all teachers can use. The process not only saves time, but also ensures consistency across classrooms. Another model is the error analysis exchange. Teachers collect student-generated items that contain misconceptions or poorly phrased problems. In a team meeting, they analyze these items to identify the misconceptions behind them. With AI, they reframe the questions to preserve the insight into student thinking while making the tasks solvable. This turns mistakes into professional learning opportunities and builds a richer understanding of how students think. Collaboration can also extend across schools. Imagine a district where 7th grade teachers from multiple schools contribute student-generated items into a central repository. AI helps sort and categorize the items by topic and standard. Teachers then draw from this growing library when designing assessments. The district gains a rich resource bank that reflects the voices of its own students, not just generic textbook questions. At the district level, the implementation of student-generated assessments requires vision and coordination. Leaders must articulate why this approach matters, how it connects to broader goals of